somewhere between midnight and dawn on March 11th, the exact hour disputed because the sirens had been sounding so continuously that Israelis had stopped registering individual alerts, a message appeared on millions of phones across the country. It did not come from Israel's Home Front Command. It bore no IDF insignia. It carried no government seal. The sender identified itself as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Written in plain text, delivered directly to the personal devices of Israeli civilians, it read, "Your government is lying to you. Missiles are on their way. No shelter can keep you safe." That notification landed in the middle of the most sustained overnight aerial assault Tel Aviv had faced since the conflict began. For roughly 3 hours, Iranian ballistic missiles and drone formations descended on central Israel in successive waves. The sirens did not pause long enough for a family to return from the shelter to their bedroom. People did not sprint downstairs for 10 minutes and come back up. They sat in reinforced stairwells and sealed rooms and waited, not for the all-clear that kept not coming, but for a night that simply would not end. Across Tel Aviv, buildings absorbed impacts. Cars sat in the street coated in the residue of explosions and shattered debris. By the time light broke over the city, millions of Israelis had been awake all night. That was precisely the objective. This dimension of the war is the one that resists simple documentation. There's no satellite image that captures it cleanly. There's no single headline that encapsulates it. What it produces instead is something that accumulates across days and weeks, a grinding exhaustion, a neurological fraying, the slow psychological collapse of a civilian population that cannot anticipate the next alarm, cannot be certain the structure they shelter in will protect them, and cannot reach for their phones in a moment of fear without finding a message from a hostile foreign intelligence service telling them that their own elected leaders have been deceiving them. Israeli analysts quoted across multiple outlets have articulated Iran's logic with unusual directness. The objective, they explain, is not the physical destruction of Tel Aviv. The objective is the erosion of the Israeli government's capacity to sustain public support for the war. The correspondent covering the West Bank for Al Jazeera quoted Iranian strategic thinking almost verbatim: keep millions of Israelis confined to shelters through the night, generate political pressure so severe that the government loses the popular mandate to continue military operations. Iran does not require a battlefield victory to accomplish this. It requires only that Israeli citizens conclude, collectively and exhaustedly, that no military objective on earth is worth what they are being asked to endure. To understand why this strategy has sharpened so dramatically in the preceding 48 hours, why the explosive payloads are increasing, why the overnight assaults are growing longer, why the psychological campaign has escalated from anonymous cyber operations to signed text messages on civilian phones, you have to understand who is now issuing the commands. On March 8th, Mojtaba Khamenei was confirmed as Iran's new supreme leader. He is 55 years old. He has never held elected office. He has no formal military command history. He has inherited a war that began before he held authority, a war being waged by a military apparatus that has already expended a substantial portion of its ballistic missile inventory against an adversary backed by American air power, Israeli intelligence infrastructure, and the most layered missile defense architecture in the modern world. And he is the surviving son of a man who was killed by American and Israeli strikes on the first day of that war. Not alone. His mother died in the same strike, his sister, his daughter, his niece, his brother-in-law, his son-in-law, every member of his immediate family, eliminated in a single operation. One morning, one set of coordinates, one strike package. The IRGC, drawing on multiple Iranian military sources and confirmed through outlet tracking of the conflict, subsequently announced a command decision issued following Mojtaba's assumption of authority. No future missile strike against Israel would deploy a warhead weighing less than 1 metric ton. The overnight barrage on March 11th included warheads of 2 metric tons each. 2,000 kilograms of explosive charge carried inside a single ballistic missile, detonated over one of the highest population density urban environments on the planet. For perspective, the warhead that penetrated a civilian shelter in Beit Shemesh on March 1st, killing 9 people inside a reinforced underground structure, weighed approximately 500 kilograms. Mojtaba Khamenei's first confirmed command decision was to multiply that baseline destructive capacity by 4. That is not a military optimization. Military optimizers calculate cost, logistics, trajectory windows, countermeasure vulnerability. What was calculated here was something else. Something that every strategic analyst now watching this conflict is struggling to categorize, because the distance between personal grief and strategic restraint is the precise threshold where wars stop being manageable, where they become something else entirely. The text message on Israeli civilian phones was not a spontaneous escalation. The heavier warheads were not an improvised response. The 3-hour overnight siege was not an operational coincidence. Mojtaba Khamenei has come into command of a war, a military, and a personal loss that has no precedent in modern diplomatic history. And for 12 consecutive days, Israel and the United States have been processing what that combination generates. One city block of structural damage at a time, one sleepless civilian population at a time, one message on a locked phone screen at a time. The information war, running parallel to the physical conflict, is one that neither government is eager to have examined with any precision, because both sides are deeply invested in it. Both sides have lost significant control of it, and the widening chasm between what official channels are declaring and what is actually occurring on the ground has become one of the conflict's defining structural features. Begin with what Iran did to Israeli phones. The IRGC mass notification was not an isolated incident. It was the escalation point of an influence campaign that has been operating since the opening hours of the war. The Jerusalem Post and Israel's National Cyber Directorate both independently confirmed that since hostilities began, Iranian actors and affiliated hacker networks have executed more than 2,000 threatening communications, targeting Israeli institutions. Cybersecurity firm Radware documented a 700% surge in malicious digital activity within the first 48 hours of the conflict alone. Distributed denial of service attacks, infiltration attempts against critical national infrastructure, data extraction operations, and malware deployment at scale. The Cyber Directorate issued specific warnings to the Israeli public about fabricated text messages, designed to deter civilians from entering bomb shelters, messages claiming that the shelters themselves were under targeted attack, engineered to force a choice between the danger of an incoming missile and the danger of a message telling them the shelter was already compromised. The IRGC's signed mass text, sent under the organization's own institutional name in Hebrew during an active missile barrage, claiming that American radar arrays had been destroyed and that no physical shelter could guarantee survival, marked the transition from covert influence operations to declared psychological warfare. Iran stopped using proxies and intermediaries. It put its own name on a message and delivered it to civilian devices while those civilians were under fire. Israel executed the mirror operation. On the opening day of the war, Israeli intelligence co-opted the Beit Saba application, a widely downloaded Iranian religious calendar platform with more than 5 million users, and broadcast mass notifications to Iranian devices. The messages targeted both IRGC soldiers and regular army personnel. The language was unambiguous. The age of the dictators is finished. Do not give your lives for a government that has already collapsed. Put down your weapons. That operation, reported by the Wall Street Journal, was designed to trigger maximum defection from Iran as military during the disorientation window of the war's first hours. Before the Iranian government could reassert control over internal communications, neither operation achieved its declared objective. Iranian troops did not defect in statistically significant numbers. Israeli civilians did not abandon shelters based on fabricated IRGC notifications. But both operations achieved something that neither government has fully acknowledged. They poisoned the information environment experienced by both civilian populations simultaneously. In a conflict where sustaining civilian resolve is a strategic variable as consequential as any military engagement, the collapse of informational trust is itself a weapon. And right now, both populations are living inside the wreckage of it. Now observe what is occurring inside that informational vacuum on the American side. At a press conference in Doral, Florida on March 9th, President Trump described the Iran conflict as a short-term excursion. He stated that it would conclude very soon. He told the Times of Israel that the decision to end the war would be made mutually between himself and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Israeli media, including the Jerusalem Post, noted with immediate concern that the phrase Trump used, describing the operation as very much complete, generated significant unease among Israeli officials over the degree of alignment between Washington and Jerusalem on war objectives. Multiple American outlets, Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, have each independently reported that the Pentagon is presenting publicly a casualty figure that does not correspond to the operational reality on the ground. The official confirmed American death toll stands at 7. Anonymous U.S. military officials and defense sources, speaking to reporters, describe the actual number as meaningfully higher, with significant additional wounded being classified through categorization systems that do not trigger mandatory public disclosure. A senior defense analyst quoted by Reuters stated without qualification that the publicly reported figures do not match the picture being described from operational bases across the Gulf. Iran, as President Pezeshkian addressed Trump's demand for unconditional surrender and placed it at the center of his formal response to the international community. The Iranian people, he stated, would carry that demand to their graves. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi posted across social media platforms describing the U.S. military operation as Operation Epic Mistake and stating publicly that Iran has prepared responses that Washington has not yet anticipated. The IRGC confirmed openly that its drone and missile manufacturing facilities have been ordered to run at double production capacity, continuously, around the clock, and across every day of the week. rebuilding the depleted inventory in parallel with ongoing combat consumption. And through all of it, through the contradictory official statements, the undisclosed casualty figures, the heavier warheads landing on urban neighborhoods, the text messages appearing on shelter screens, the President of the United States describing a sustained missile war as a short-term excursion, the residents of Tel Aviv are running to basement shelters at 3 a.m, and when they get there, they are picking up their phones. And on those phones, they are finding a message from Iran telling them that the government that sent them to that shelter has been lying to them throughout. The information war is not a secondary theater, it is the conflict within the conflict. And at this moment, no party to it is winning cleanly. Let us address directly what the next phase of this war appears to be moving toward, because the signals are coherent, they are pointing in a single direction, and neither government is communicating honestly to its own population about the trajectory. Iran has stated publicly through the IRGC that it possesses the capacity to sustain the conflict at its current operational intensity for a minimum of 6 months. This is not a propaganda boast designed for domestic audiences. It is a strategic declaration of staying power, directed at Washington, a deliberate communication that any timeline the American president announces publicly will be systematically contradicted by Iranian operations on the ground in real time. Trump announces, very soon, Iran launches 3 hours of missiles at Tel Aviv overnight. Trump announces, short-term excursion. Iran delivers signed text messages to Israeli civilian phones at 3 a.m. The distance between the presidential statement and the operational reality is territory that Iran is deliberately occupying in real time with every barrage. The financial pressure accumulating on Israel is documented and accelerating. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Finance Minister Smotrich issued a joint statement on March 10th, confirming that the war requires a special supplemental budget measured in tens of billions of shekels, a figure that Israel's current fiscal framework cannot absorb without structural changes to how the state allocates and generates resources. Smotrich announced the suspension of multiple legislative priorities, including the politically significant ultra-Orthodox military draft exemption bill, in order to concentrate governmental capacity entirely on the war effort. Israel is a country of approximately 9.5 million people. No nation of that scale can maintain a full wartime mobilization indefinitely without consequences that move through every layer of its economy and society. Israeli commercial airlines have ceased publishing departure schedules. The country's airports have effectively halted normal civilian air traffic. Israelis with the resources to travel are arriving at terminals and discovering there are no flights. Israelis without those resources are remaining in apartments that may lack private shelter rooms, running to shared public facilities, and waking up to find an IRGC notification on their phones informing them that the shelter they are sitting in is the most dangerous place they could be. The Israeli government's official position is that the war is proceeding on schedule, that stated objectives are being achieved, and that Iranian military capability is being systematically dismantled. The evidence lends partial support to this framing. U.S. CENTCOM confirmed that Iranian ballistic missile launches declined by approximately 90% between day 1 and day 6 of the conflict, the direct result of Israeli and American strikes eliminating more than 300 Iranian mobile missile launch platforms. Iran's naval capacity has been characterized by the White House as combat ineffective following American operations that sank more than 50 Iranian naval vessels. B-2 stealth bombers deployed bunker-penetrating munitions against deeply reinforced Iranian missile storage and launch infrastructure. But a 90% reduction from 90 launches per day still means launches occurring every day. Missiles are still reaching Tel Aviv. Cluster warheads are still dispersing submunitions across densely inhabited neighborhoods. Overnight barrages are still keeping millions of civilians from sleeping. And Iran, by its own confirmed account and through the factory orders that have been independently verified, is manufacturing replacement missiles and drones at a rate designed to match or outpace its rate of expenditure. Washington Post reporting has confirmed that a small number of senior Israeli officials have begun asking privately what an actual end state looks like. These are not calls for capitulation. They are expressions of a question for which there is currently no official answer. What does Israeli victory look like, specifically and concretely? And is the military campaign as currently structured producing it? The U.S. military has stated publicly that it requires 4 to 6 weeks to accomplish its objectives. Those objectives, as articulated by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, are the destruction of Iran's missile program, a permanent guarantee that Iran will not acquire nuclear weapons, and the elimination of Iran's capacity to project proxy destabilization across the region. None of these objectives has a defined military endpoint. Destroying every missile launch platform in Iran is categorically not the same as destroying Iran's industrial capacity to build new ones. Permanently preventing nuclear weapons acquisition is an ongoing monitoring and enforcement requirement, not a condition achievable through a finite military operation. Ending proxy capability requires either removing the government responsible for it or reaching a durable political agreement. And neither is currently available because Iran's new supreme leader is not engaged in any negotiation. And America's stated demand of unconditional surrender has been publicly and repeatedly rejected by every Iranian official authorized to speak. Mojtaba Khamenei has now held supreme authority for 4 days. In that time, he has mandated heavier warheads. He has authorized prolonged overnight bombardments. He has not contacted any mediating party. He has not communicated any openness to a ceasefire under any framework or condition. He has, according to the IRGC's own confirmed public declarations, issued standing operational orders to conduct the war at maximum sustainable intensity. A man who watched his entire family die in a single airstrike, who now controls the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, with 3 nuclear powers providing him strategic backing and his industrial facilities running double shifts, is the individual that the United States and Israel must either defeat comprehensively or negotiate with successfully. There is no third path available in this war. The text messages will continue arriving. The missiles will continue flying. The overnight sirens will continue sounding. And in the shelter stairwells of Tel Aviv, on the phones of families who have not experienced an uninterrupted night of sleep since the 28th of February, the screen will keep illuminating, carrying messages from a man who has lost everything that could have been taken from him, and who still holds everything that has not yet been used.